Yeah, thank you very much, Sean. Welcome back. It's good to have you there. And thank you very much for what you're doing in the background for us, answering those questions and making sure everything runs smoothly. Welcome to all of our attendees this morning. We welcome you back to the Tuesday morning Toolbox Talks brought to you by FEM, IOPSA, as well as accredited with 1 CPD point from SIOSH. Please don't forget, every Monday morning at 7 a.m., we have the Toolbox Talks that are then translated into Zulu. So this morning's Toolbox Talk on auditing of plumbing will then be given next week, Monday at 7 a.m. in Zulu. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, please do so. If you know of anybody, doesn't have to be a SIOSH or a IOPSA member, any person who has access to the internet and can listen into these Toolbox Talks are more than welcome to join. In fact, that goes for the English Toolbox Talks as well. The wider reach we have, the more discussions and topics we can talk about. Now, as we mentioned last week, we are going to be looking at a different type of auditing from a safety perspective. In fact, coming up on the 1st of October this year, we have a how-to section on audits. But this type of auditing is the auditing of your safety files or your safety management system, how to ensure that you are currently compliant with legislation. The auditing that we are discussing this morning is the installation of various types of plumbing. So as we mentioned last week in the COCs, the reason why you get given a certificate of compliance is to ensure that the installation of plumbing is done correctly according to the codes and standards. So this auditing process also has certain risks and hazards, and that's what we want to discuss with you this morning. So one of the things that we want to discuss, particularly when it comes to audits, is ensuring that you keep yourself safe while doing an audit. So for here, we are speaking to all the auditors out there, all the plumbers who are going up to actually check the inspections. It's not always that you're going to find a geyser inside a ceiling. Oftentimes you can find them outside. If you're going to non-residential buildings, you may be finding them in very easy to access areas. But there are going to be many times where the installation is going to be in a hard to reach or a difficult access area. But what is an audit? And why are audits done in order to accomplish a COC? Well, in South Africa, standards have been promulgated or made up that are applicable to every level of person working in the industry. And therefore, no matter if you're an architect, a developer, a QS, an engineer, or a plumber, you are required to abide by a set of laws. For occupational health and safety practitioners or safety managers and safety officers out there, we also have the OSH Act as well as 21 regulations that govern what we do, as well as different types of SANS codes. For those of you who are working with the ISO, perhaps you're working with a new 45001 standard that is guiding your management system. So we can see that this set of rules or laws or principles as such comes out in order to guide us to not only a safer working environment, but a higher quality of safety. Now, this auditing process and the standards that have been done for plumbing does exactly the same. It is a standard that has been designed to ensure the quality and safety of an installation, ensuring that it is 100% compliant, not 90, not 80, 100%. Now, why are laws and auditing so important? And here we are not taking any single person or any single industry out and saying that you are doing something wrong. All of us make mistakes. And there are some common mistakes that plumbers do make when securing of pipes and supports of the geyser trays. Things like the overflow discharge on a geyser for the safety valve. But what we must just keep in mind is that the standards have been established and they must be followed. Now, it's in any industry, whether you're a plumber, an electrician, or even in a safety environment. All of us have certain standards in order to follow, and we must follow them perfectly. Now, you might say to yourself, well, no one's perfect, and they say, practice makes perfect. If no one's perfect, why practice? Well, if you have a set of laws and you have a checklist in order to ensure that it is been done according to that, well, then you can have a 100% compliant installation. And as plumbers, you realize that. As safety professionals, requesting information on how these installations are done safely, well, there are certain things that you would require from your side. As we discussed last week, a safe working procedure is one of the biggest requirements, and that's aside from other main documents like your plan to install these geyser installations or any other plumbing installations, your risk assessment, your DSTIs for the actual day, and even the monitoring and review of the entire system. But really, the document that you are going to focus on uh, in conjunction with the risk assessment is the procedure for safe works on an audit. Now, last week we discussed some of the dangers. Let us just recap what is actually dangerous for an auditor going out to audit a piece of plumbing equipment. Well, as we mentioned, while you are trying to gather necessary information about the installation, before you even start working, there are things like correct access to the area. If this access is at a height, well, then you are in danger of working at heights, becoming one of your biggest hazards. Most of the installations that are in have been tested. And this means that electricity or open or live electricity might be in the area that you are working in. You then have confined spaces. If you look at the blocks at the bottom of your screen, extreme temperatures, especially coming up into spring and summer, here in South Africa, we do have extremely hot days. So we're not just talking about the next week. What about the weeks and months to come? Have we already set aside safe working procedures for different types of environments? What about toxic exposure? Working in a confined space, repetitive motion injuries. A lot of us do not take into consideration the ergonomic design of how working is being done. So when I followed a plumber the other day to go and do an inspection on a actual geyser, the geyser was mounted pretty much at about eye level, but the valve or the intake valve was right at the bottom, at about, I'd say about 20 centimeters from the floor, coming up through the wall and then just elbowing up into the geyser. Now, the difficulty on this was that the plumber had to actually lay down flat on his back and then lift his head up pretty high to be able to look and see if he can try and figure out why this um, geyser was leaking, putting himself into a very difficult, very awkward position. And he stayed like that for about half an hour. Now you might think, well, it's only 30 minutes. It's about as long as this toolbox talk. That's not too long. We do it every single day. But that is the problem, isn't it? We are doing it every single day. The same repetitive motions. And eventually, this will take toll on our bones, the joints, and the rest of our body. So please remember that we want to also try and combat the ergonomic design of our working environment and put this as part of your safe working procedure as well. When I was watching this plumber, it was him and another plumber that was assisting him, and lifting the geyser was also pretty heavy, and it was just the two of them. So lifting heavy objects and heavy equipment was also a place where they could have derived some injuries. Obviously, when opening up any piping or waste piping, flying particles. In fact, not just the piping itself, but opening the doors or cupboards or things in and around the environment that they had to move around, flying particles, dust, um, asbestos, a lot of other aspects were involved. And these are hazards and dangers that sometimes are not foreseen before we arrive at the job. So when we do an audit or even an installation that is requiring an audit to be done for a COC. These are certain things that we should take to mind. And as health and safety practitioners, you should be requesting this type of documentation as well to see that the methodology, the step-by-step procedure of how this is going to be done safely is in place. Now, we said at the beginning, we want to keep you safe. Well, how do you keep yourself safe? Well, this is again a reminder from last week. Each hazard must be understood and the risk must be assessed. So yes, it is a risk assessment, and why not take a look at a course like HIRA, Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment. There are many different types of HIRA courses out there, but there are some where it is just an awareness program. It's an in-house training where you use your own manuals that are accredited with SACWA or one of the CETAs. And what this does is it just gives you the knowledge to understand what is a risk assessment. And it assists you in developing and designing your own risk assessment. You don't have to be the main risk assessor on site. You are doing this for continual professional development for one, but at the same time, in order to keep yourself and everybody else around you aware of the dangers. If you do want to become an actual risk assessor, then why not look at an accredited course to go and do a full baseline risk assessment, issue-based risk assessment, as well as a continuous risk assessment. Obviously, time and money is involved in that, but a little bit of research will always assist you in understanding the risks that are attached to your job. In other words, if you're climbing into a ceiling, and this is one that we are going to discuss today, when you want to climb into a ceiling, you have to think about things like accessing the ceiling and then exiting that ceiling via a ladder or other means of access. The lighting inside the ceiling. You're going to be exposed to dust, limited foot space, as well as the area may be low and cramped. So it is best practice to develop a safe operating or safe working procedure for these individual activities. Remember, it can save your life. Now, let us see why it can do that. Let us look at a safe working procedure and how you should go about designing this. Now, as I mentioned last week, I do have a couple of safe working procedures that I'd like to send you, and I'm going to be sending them out throughout the course of today to all of those who have requested it. For those of you who have not requested it, please drop your email address down, because I am going to be giving you templates of current installations. In other words, putting in a tap or putting in a cold water pipe, putting in a water feed, looking at sewage or waste piping. But then I'll also give you a blank template. Now, this blank template basically is not going to have anything on it, but at least the design is there for you to look at how we've currently done certain installations, and then you can actually physically write in your own safe working procedures. And what I'd like to offer here is to request all of you out there, safety officers included, and all of you plumbers, whether you're an IOPSA member, FEM member, any of you listening in, we are going to be having a little bit of a competition. We would like to give you the template of a safe working procedure and ask you to design it on installing a piece of plumbing safely. Now, you can choose what plumbing you want, whether it be boilers, whether it be geysers, whether it be water reticulation systems, whatever it is that you want to install. We would like you to design a safe working procedure, and we are going to choose someone out of those safe working procedures for a prize, and that prize will be given out during the month of October. So we're going to give you a couple of weeks to design it, maybe go through the actual motions of the installation, use the template that we are going to send out to you today, and then we are going to give away a prize next month in October. You'll be notified ahead of time that you will receive that prize. It is a monetary prize that we'd like you to use maybe for a lunch or taking your team out. But we would like the feedback from you as the plumbers in the industry. And at the same time, we can start deriving a little bit more information on how these installations are actually done according to you, the plumber. And what this is going to assist us with is seeing where we have maybe made our mistakes in not putting the correct steps of how to do it safely. And really, the ultimate goal here is to give us all the clarity and understanding of what you are really going through so we can ensure a safer working environment for everyone. So when you have this template that you're going to be receiving today, please start off by ensuring that you have an assessment of the risk. Now, this can be done through a DSTI. If you remember that we did have it on the 5th of February 2019 this year, we had a how-to section on DSTIs and we gave away a template of a DSTI. Now, we don't want you to add that template in. We just want you to state in the safe working procedure that one of the administration requirements would be a risk assessment. Now you develop a how-to guide, a step-by-step methodology, as it will. In other words, how do you go about step-by-step completing that entire task? Once you've designed this document, communicate, communicate, communicate. That is extremely important. It's not what we have to do. It's how we are going to go about doing it, and each member of our team knowing and fully understanding how it must be done. With cooperation and working together, everyone will be able to work safely. Well, once this is communicated, everybody has been trained on the safe working procedure. You now implement that safe working procedure and ensure that you observe how it is being done. And this can be done with what we call a PTO, or a planned task observation. This is something that we discussed on the 21st of the 5th of this year. And it was also a how-to section on planned task observations. Basically, we also gave you a template for this, and this took you through a step-by-step procedure of checking the actual task that was being done. Now, you've set out a safe working procedure. How do you monitor whether it is actually effective? Well, this is done by planning to observe the task, where you check a few questions off. Was the safe working procedure done correctly? Was the correct methodology followed? Was the correct PPE being used? Is there a different type of tool or piece of equipment being used this time? And this will help you to now review your safe working procedure. The importance of this is to check whether it is adequate, whether it is viable for the industry that you're working in, but at the same time, is it successful in preventing injuries and accidents? So really, this is the goal. Safe working procedures must be read and understood before we commence work. And this can only be done if we work together. So as we say in every industry, safety first. So is that really a focus of your current working environment? Well, what can you do? Before you go out to your audit or your installation during this coming week, or perhaps even today, do you have the correct information? Do you know where it's going to be done? And when you know that, have you checked that area when you've arrived? Have you set up your correct access? Whether it's a ladder, have you abided by the 4:1 ratio? If you are using a ladder that is just an A-frame ladder, are you keeping in mind that you need somebody to hold that ladder for you? Even when you open a ceiling board to access inside, a suggestion that came out from Steve at our technical side on IOPSA stated that your hands might be dusty or dirty. So perhaps keep a little bit of clean cloth with you in order to put that on the ceiling board so that the client is not requesting you to repaint his entire ceiling because you've made a few scruff or scratch marks or dust marks on that actual ceiling board. So just a few things to think about. It's not part of safety, but really it's going to keep you healthy and clean when you finish off your site from a housekeeping perspective. Also, when you open that board, you need to watch out for any falling particles, perhaps dust or pieces of insulation that might be falling out the ceiling. So eye protection will be a necessity for installing or even auditing purposes. Inside, the ceiling may be dark. Do you have the correct lighting with you? And here we ask, how have you carried that torch or tools up with you into the ceiling? Do you have a correct bag in order to keep this in instead of holding it in your hands while you are climbing the ladder? When you are inside, have you first inspected where you are going to stand? Have you checked inside the ceiling for any possible risks? Remember, they are all around you. You need to protect yourself. But we'd like to hand it over to you. All of those who have attended, we are going to give you a blank template of a safe working procedure, and we'd like to see if this competition can run for the next couple of weeks. And then the grand prize, sending it out to one of you to see how we can really actively do safe working procedures correctly in the plumbing environment. And please, you safety professionals, get in touch as well. We'd love to hear from you, because really you know the law and you know what we should be doing. But the plumbers know how the plumbing should be done. So if we can combine these two, really we can come up with an effective safe working procedure to keep everyone safe during audit times. As a quick reminder, IOPSA and FEM have approved 2 courses, first aid and firefighting, that are given every single month during the year of 2019. So we are kind of fully booked all the way up until November. The next course we only have is in December, and we'll send out reminders of that. But please, if you have not put your name down, chris@ohss.co.za, safety@iopsa.org, info@ohss.co.za, or WhatsApp us on 071-875-2070, and we'll send out a reminder to all of those who have already booked. Thank you very much for joining our Toolbox Talk this morning. As we mentioned, the Zulu Toolbox Talk that is translated is next week, Monday at 7 a.m. But we look forward to seeing the English ones joining us once again next week, Tuesday, for the topic on manual handling and how we are going to do this safely. Once again, thank you very much from my side, FEM, IOPSA, OHSS Consulting, as well as SIOSH. And we'd like to hand it over back to you, Sean.
Right, perfect. Thanks so much, Chris. I've got a question here from the audience for you. It reads, what is a DSTI?
Thank you very much for that question, Sean, and to the audience out there. A DSTI is a daily safe task instruction, often referred to as a mini risk assessment. What this does is every day before you start a task, you identify the risks and hazards. You then write down a safe working procedure only on that task that you're going to perform. You check whether there are any high risk hazards, such as working at heights, electricity, and then any necessities that might be needed from an engineering perspective, such as lockout or tagout, and then an administrative perspective, such as risk assessment, safe work procedures, etc. This DSTI then guides you through what you need to know or ask in order to assess the risk. And then there's a little closeout form at the back, basically closing off your task or for the day to ensure that it's safe for you to return the next day. It's not a requirement for every industry, but it is really a good practice. And if you can get into something like this every day, you will really see your safety program increasing and the lives of your employees being kept safe. Thanks, Sean.
Right, perfect. We have got another question. It reads, is it important that you have the right clothing when performing your duties?
Definitely the right clothing, obviously, for the environment as well as the specific task. So it's very difficult to tell you what is the right clothing until we actually understand the environment that you're in. For instance, if you are in an area with biologicals, well, then you'll need to have a work suit that protects against any biological hazards. If you are in an asbestos environment, well, then the clothing that you're using is going to be obviously for asbestos. If you're working out in general maintenance, such as general plumbing, water piping, things like that, well, then just your normal overalls will do. But really, it depends on the environment you're in, as well as the type of task and tools that you are working with, which means you need to do a bit of an analysis on the PPE that you are required to use. Thanks, Sean.
Right, perfect. And then our final question here this morning reads, what is the difference between a DSTI and the HIRA?
So as we mentioned, there's not much of a difference. It is called a mini risk assessment, but please remember HIRA as such is an actual program for identifying the risks and hazards within the entire environment and all the tasks that we perform, starting with a baseline risk assessment, which is a baseline of every single risk and hazard that is involved within all our scope of works, every task that we perform. We then have an issue or task-based risk assessment, and this is taking each task that we perform, like installing a geyser, installing a tap, or installing a basin, and having its own individual risk assessment. And then we have the continuous risk assessment program, and that is where the DSTR falls in. It's a continuous program of ensuring that the risks are always identified, mitigated, and reviewed on a daily or weekly or monthly basis as your program allows. And this basically gives force as well as power to the other two risk assessments, making them stronger and keeping everyone in the loop of what is actually happening in the program. So HIRA as such is more of a program. The DSTR is an actual physical document. Thanks, Sean.